The Rip City Drive.
Super stoked to welcome on my guy Joey Hoyt from the Dallas Morning News, fellow U of O journalism school graduate, doing big things there in the great state of Texas. Joey, what's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
Of course, man. Good to talk with you.
Absolutely. And, dude, I've been following your work for years, man, ever since you made the move to Dallas, first covering high school sports, and now on the college beat, you're covering SMU, and saw you wrote an awesome article with the picture that certainly got me to click on it, which was George Kliavkov and then another guy looking on in an SMU athletic facility. And I read your article. I think it's pretty fascinating. I think people out here in Pac-12 country are interested in Pac-12 expansion. And so I guess just kind of starting surface level, what can you tell us about what you know and what you've learned about a chance that SMU might join the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting because if you go back a couple weeks to right before that meeting when George Kliavkov visited SMU, I think SMU and the Pac-12 would like none of this to be out. So I think, what we know is in large part based off the events of George Kliavkov visiting. That was a surreal night in itself because I had reported that he was in town, but no one knew exactly where he was or if he was going to show up to the basketball game. So then me and another reporter from The Athletic were just searching the entire time trying to find him. And eventually we found him up in, a suite, kind of hidden a little bit. Got that photo that you mentioned. But basically what we kind of know now is there's plenty of mutual interest. And a lot of people around here think it's a matter of when, not if. But obviously there's certain things to figure out. We have to get a media rights deal secured first, which I think is kind of tied with SMU and San Diego State potentially joining. And once those dominoes fall into place, then we'll maybe get expansion. But a lot of people here in SMU country feel very confident and have felt confident for quite some time that this realignment would be the one that puts them in a Power 5 position.
Joey, I'm kind of curious, what does SMU bring to the Pac-12? I know they bring the media market. We all know about Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Metroplex and all that. But what else? What do they bring to this conference?
No, it's a great question because even when we talk about bringing the media market, what does SMU in Dallas bring in terms of a digital streaming option, which it seems that the Pac-12 is going towards? SMU, when you think of Dallas, there's a lot of sports here. There's the Cowboys, there's TCU down the street that just went to the national championship. There's the Mavericks, the Stars. Long story short, there's a lot of competition and not a lot of people. SMU has a below average Division I enrollment. Obviously, there's plenty of money at SMU, so they bring that kind of endowment with them, a $2 billion endowment. But how much eyes would they bring if we're talking streaming? I think that's a big question. I think it's something the Pac-12 has to answer. Obviously, it opens up a new pool of potential subscribers if you're Amazon or Apple. But the other thing SMU does bring, though, with it is the chance to get into Dallas and into Texas in terms of recruiting for the Pac-12 teams. Oregon, for example, has no problem coming into Texas and doing some recruiting. Christian Gonzalez, for example, who transferred from Colorado, but he was the guy from DFW that eventually made it up there. Michael James is another Texas to Oregon guy, so they've never had a problem with that. But coming every other year for a school like Cal to Texas, Stanford, that could give them, a potential pipeline in one of the most fertile recruiting grounds in the country.
And Joey, what about the other side of this coin, SMU's interest in joining the Pac-12? Obviously they're in the American right now, so they'd be joining a Power 5 conference, granted one that in the national eyes, is getting worse with the LA schools leaving. That being said, it is a chance to compete at what's considered the highest level of college football. But, SMU is in Dallas. They're very far from the rest of the Pac-12 schools. That could potentially be a recruiting disadvantage for them. Just what are the factors that you think SMU is weighing and whether or not they would like this move? And is it kind of a no-brainer? Like, yes, we do it 100%, or are they weighing their options?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer that they want to be a Power 5 team. If you go back to, the Pony Express, you go back to the Southwest Conference days, SMU was a top 10 program in the entire country. And then obviously we know what happened after that with the death penalty. And since then, there's been kind of a feeling of, hey, we need to get back to that level. We belong at that level. A lot of times everyone thought the direct path would be through the Big 12. And the Big 12 kind of ended up being almost like the girlfriend that the guy pursues for a long, long time, only to be kind of kept on the hook, but never actually invited to the dance. And obviously with Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and UCF going, that was kind of a reality check for people here in Dallas that, hey, maybe the Big 12 is not our option. So what can we offer to someone? And obviously with the Pac-12, they do offer a chance to get into Dallas. In theory, they offer the market. I think that if the ACC had shown any interest in expanding, which as of right now they really haven't, I think SMU would love to go east as well. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer for them. The only trepidation I think SMU fans have is you don't have to go too long ago to see when they went to the Big East. A lot of people thought that might be their big moment to jump up. And then the Big East had some problems. Next, that dissolved a little bit into the American Athletic Conference, which they're currently at now. So I think a lot of people have a little fear of, hey, what if by jumping to the Pac-12, we're jumping on a sinking ship? What if we go there and then Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10, and then Arizona and Arizona State go to the Big 12? And, next thing you know, we're kind of paying money to get into a field that's not what we thought it would be. So that's the fear here from SMU fans, but I think the no-brainerness outweighs any fear they may have about jumping to the Pac-12.
Okay, next question for you, Joey, is how are they on the court, on the field? How far away are they from being able to be, some sort of a contender in the Pac-12 in either major sport?
Yeah, I wrote recently, because they celebrated their recent signing class, and I wrote recently that they are trying to recruit to position themselves to be in a Power 5 team in 2025. They added 17 transfers. They took 16 high school kids, but they added 17 transfers, including, they now have a backfield of 3 top 5 running backs in the entire country based on when they came out of high school. All 3 were transfers. So they believe that the way they can use NIL to add transfers positions themselves to really play against Power 5 teams. They'll get 2 chances next year when they play Oklahoma, at Oklahoma, and they go to TCU. So football-wise, they feel pretty confident that they can step in 2025 and compete. Basketball-wise, still a little bit of ways to go. They're in the first year with head coach Rob Lanier, and, they've shown some progress of late. But obviously, with a losing record, there's no chance of a postseason run here, barring a sweep in the tournament, conference tournament. So they've got some room to grow there on the basketball court. But football-wise, there's a lot of confidence they could step into the Pac-12 and compete immediately.
Joey Hoyt of the Dallas Morning News joining us here on Rip City Drive, talking the potential of SMU to the Pac-12. He covers SMU out there in Dallas. What about their fan base? I mean, I know you talk about the money, the endowments. I think people generally in the public are aware that they're a well-funded school. But what about like the fan base of the teams? How well do they draw? How big are their stadiums? Like, do they have a Power 5 caliber fan base behind them?
Yeah, good question. Because, one of the big bugaboos with SMU fans, things that they'll take personally, is when you talk about attendance. If you look at how they've drawn on an attendance basis, it hasn't been that great. I think they're averaging about 25,000 fans, which if you were to go to the Pac-12 tomorrow in its current state, that would be the second to last, I believe, just ahead of Washington State. Even though I've been to the Palouse, I know Washington State fans can get a little rowdy. So, SMU, that's something that they probably would tell you would grow if they were to go to the Pac-12. It's a lot different, welcoming USF into town on a Saturday in Dallas versus welcoming Oregon. So I think that they believe that they could probably gather more fans there with that jump. But as of now, it wouldn't put them in a very high position in the Pac-12 in terms of fan base numbers.
And Joey, how about the facilities? What does their football stadium hold and their basketball arena, and how close do they come to filling those venues?
Yeah, the basketball, Moody Coliseum, their basketball arena, when things are going well here, like they did last year, they were on the bubble for about 2 months and just was, I think the 3rd team left out of the tournament. But there was interest there, and, Moody Coliseum was pretty packed all season long. Recently, they welcomed Houston for the final time before they go to the Big 12, and it was completely packed. and it's a really good environment, really good basketball environment. But football-wise, they don't, as of right now, they only sold out one game that I've ever covered, and that was against TCU, which is obviously a very easy trip in a big rivalry game for them. And they filled that out. But facilities-wise, they're in the process of doing a $110 million expansion right now to the football stadium, and including that will be a new football headquarters and weight room and all that other stuff. And they just did a new soccer stadium and track facility. So they really are pushing to upgrade these facilities. I think if you kind of look at which programs have gone G5 to Power 5, facility upgrades is kind of the first big thing. That's what TCU did before it went into the Big 12. Houston did that. Cincinnati did a whole bunch of things before they went to the Big 12. So if you want to be a G5 team that goes to P5, you've got to upgrade your facilities, and SMU is currently well into the process of that.
Joey Hoyt of the Dallas Morning News joining us, talking SMU to the Pac-12 and the potential of that. All right, in your article, you did interview, you spoke with a couple people. It's like some guy from Media Watch and some other folks. I mean, what have you learned from people in the know about like the reality of this and when a decision could be made? If George Kliavkoff has spoken, to the president in depth, or just kind of what the status of this potential expansion move is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, kind of as I mentioned, the feeling around here, with SMU, there's been a lot of confidence about going Power 5 since USC and UCLA left. So we're talking since July. And it was almost kind of like, as the months went on, it was like, okay, you have confidence, but, there hasn't been any action. So, and we know what happened in the past with the Big 12 kind of, leaving them on the hook a little bit. So it's like, I don't know where this confidence is coming from. Clearly, the confidence comes from the work they did behind the scenes with the Pac-12, which kind of came into fruition. I think, it is a matter of when, not if, or at least that's the feeling around here. What they actually end up bringing, in terms of value, I think is more potential based and more projectable, rather than what's kind of rooted in reality right now, in terms of what they bring to the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 has got to get strategic. I mean, you're not going to replace USC and UCLA. 5 million fans watched that game last year. And obviously USC is a big brand. But if you do add San Diego State and you do add a school like SMU, that's adding some potential to what you've lost. I think the Big 12 is really applauded for how they handled losing Oklahoma and Texas. And I think that they feel like they're in a stable place moving forward. And I think the Pac-12 needs to kind of get some stability there, and they can do it in a strategic fashion by adding San Diego State and SMU.
I'm real curious about this, Joey. It's a Cowboys town. It's a Dallas Cowboys town. And you also have Kyrie joining the Mavericks. You got the Stars, who had some pretty good hockey teams. You got the Rangers, who've made a big splash in free agency this year. Can you get people in Dallas interested in college sports? Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility, but that's a huge question. I mean, it's one of those things that, hey, if you add SMU, you add the Dallas market. Great theory. But in practice, we'll see, because like you pointed out, there's a lot of competition here. Not only do you have the Dallas, Mavericks, you have the Stars, you have the Cowboys. You also have high school football every Friday, which it draws huge attendance numbers. And, do you want to spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday high school football game, Saturday SMU, and then Sunday at the Cowboys? Like, that's a lot of football for one weekend. I mean, I know Texas is football country, but that's a lot to take in. So I mean, that is the big question from a Pac-12 perspective, is by adding SMU, what do you actually get? And I think there's reasons to believe there is potential, and potential for growth too from an SMU perspective. We saw TCU kind of go from a Mountain West team to all the way to the national championship, and there are a lot of eyes that follow them throughout their run this season. Maybe the Pac-12 says, hey, we can get our own TCU with SMU. Dallas, private, a lot of money, good recruiting grounds, and we just need to give them that Power 5 badge. But whether or not it actually turns out is something that obviously remains to be seen. But, the Pac-12, I kind of wrote this, the Pac-12 has to take a risk, and that might be the best risk there is.
Joey Hoyt of the Dallas Morning News joining us here on the Rip City Drive, talking about SMU to the Pac-12 potentially. All right, Joey, as we kind of wrap it up, I guess I'm just wondering, I'm looking at Kliavkoff here in this picture. He's got an NBA Finals hat on and a quarter zip. He was keeping it pretty low profile. Did you or anyone get the chance to chat with him, or how did that night as a journalist go, as you and that athletic reporter were kind of tracking down the story?
Yeah, one of the most unique reporting experiences I've had, because we knew he was there or on campus, but we didn't know he was actually at the game, and that was the whole reason we were there. So Chris Vanini and I literally were, walking the entire concourse, walking up and down the stands trying to find, where George Kliavkoff might be. I literally had some fans come up to me and be like, "Hey, are you looking for George? Oh, he's right there on the court." And they'd point out some random guy, and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm sorry to tell you this. That's not George Kliavkoff." So we literally, Chris had binoculars going, and it was at a point where, like, we've seen George Kliavkoff in a suit and a tie and a button-up, but we've never seen him in an NBA Finals hat and a quarter zip. So
yeah, he wasn't going limo Larry here. He was keeping it low key.
Very low key. So actually, I had to call my boss and be like, "Hey, here's the photo." I'm 99% sure it's him. And honestly, the big confirming thing was next to him was one of his assistants at the Pac-12. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But we looked him up, me and Chris did, and we're like, "Oh, wait, that guy has that's 100% the same guy. Same haircut, everything. He's got a, pretty distinctive, comb over." So we're like, okay, this is enough evidence to kind of go forth and say George Kliavkoff is here. We tried waiting him out by the elevators to the suites, but eventually we were kicked out of there before he could come down. So it was a very unique night. Very, very.
There we go. Godfather, you want to ask your Kyrie question before we get out of here?
Joey, I know you don't cover the Mavs, but still, there must be quite a vibe going on right now in Dallas about that whole situation of Kyrie and Luka playing together. How exciting is that?
I know fans are very excited. I was actually golfing with a buddy who's a diehard Mavs fan when it happened, and it's kind of the Arrested Development theory of, hey, it didn't work for other teams, but maybe it'll work for us. So there's a lot of excitement around that, and obviously, a big question though is how well the two can interact with each other and play together before the playoffs come, because obviously there's some hungry fans here in Dallas for another championship, whether it be the Mavs, the Stars, or the Cowboys eventually one day, because there's a lot of history.
And Joey, it's not really very polite of you to bring up the word golf when we have snow on the ground up here.
I know. Take care with that. Yeah, I saw that storm. I was like, wow. So I lived through one Portland storm when I lived there, and it was I know how the city can shut down a little. So
wait, just tease us for a second. What's the temperature right now in Dallas?
It's a freezing 50 degrees and sunny. So.
Oof. I don't know how you're going to do it, man. I would take that in a heartbeat. I think it's 28 here, and we got 4 inches of snow. So.
Oh, that's cool, man. I saw Dame's rap though, and I really appreciated that from the plane. So there's some good that's come out of that storm.
No doubt. All right, Joey. Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for hopping on. Appreciate your perspective, and who knows? Maybe we'll bump into each other in a press box down the road here.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Take care, and thanks for having me on.